It's often said that history is written by the victors, but that's not always the case. Looking back on Jose Mourinho's 3 seasons at Manchester United, it's hard to argue that it was an unmitigated success. A League Cup, a Europa League title and a second-place league finish in 2017-18 are hardly the measure of what is expected of a Manchester United manager. And yet, speaking in 2019, the Portuguese claimed that his reign was undervalued, and that few people recognise how impressive it really was within its context. So, was he right? The Jose Mourinho era started out well enough, with a win against Leicester in the Community Shield and 3 wins in 3 in the Premier League. But they would finish 6th, a full 24 points behind that season's champions, Chelsea. United had finished 4th and 5th in previous seasons under Louis van Gaal, but Mourinho also won the Europa League that season. On their way to the final, Manchester United faced Feyenoord, Zorya Lugansk, Fenerbahce, St Etienne, Rostov, Anderlecht and Celta Vigo, before coming up against Ajax in the final. Interestingly, Manchester United only won 60% of their games in the competition that season in normal time. Such is the nature of knockout football, and as everyone knows, the league format is a much better indicator of consistent performance. It should come as no surprise then that Mourinho pointed out his second-place finish with Manchester United in the 2017-18 season as one of his most impressive feats. But how good was that season? Well, 2017-18 has become known more colloquially as the Centurian season. The season where Manchester City picked up 100 points in the league. Manchester United were 19 points behind them and 4 points ahead of Tottenham in 3rd. After a summer which saw them sign Romelu Lukaku, Nemanja Matic, Alexis Sanchez and Victor Lindelof, they started well, winning 4 of their opening 7 games by a scoreline of 4-0. By this point, Manchester United were in the second place that would be theirs by the time the season ended. But a 2-1 loss to recently promoted Huddersfield Town halted their progress, and from that point onwards, they never came close to challenging Manchester City for the title. Of course, no one would treat one of the greatest seasons by a Premier League side as a benchmark against which Mourinho's Manchester United should be judged. And that year, United did manage to beat Pep Guardiola's Man City in a fine 3-2 comeback at the Etihad. However, if you look at the underlying numbers for that season, a slightly different picture emerges of who the best teams in the Premier League were. Looking at the expected goal numbers from that season and sorting by expected goal difference, that is, the difference between expected goals for and expected goals against, Manchester United dropped down to 5th. Now, obviously the Premier League is not decided by expected goal numbers, but this does suggest that Manchester United weren't performing at a level that suggested that they were the second best in the league. So why did they finish higher than the teams around them? Well, one clue can be found by looking at the performances of David De Gea, the Manchester United goalkeeper. That season, FB Ref data suggests that the Spaniard saved his team around 8.5 goals against what you might expect from the shots that he faced. Without this overperformance, perhaps things would have been different. And by the end of the season, signs of the inevitable decline that had been a staple feature of Jose Mourinho's managerial stints had already begun to set in. There had been fallouts with players. Luke Shaw, for example, seemed to attract a lot of criticism of his manager, and there were also high-profile disagreements with Paul Pogba. Slowly but surely, these off-field issues translated into on-field issues, and by December in Mourinho's 3rd season, he was fired by the club. So, has history been unkind to Jose Mourinho's time at Manchester United? Well, in hindsight, it should be mitigated by the fact that all of the managers brought in during the post-Sir Alex Ferguson era have struggled. His trophy haul certainly remains the best of that crop of coaches, even if it does come with caveats. By the time that he'd left the club, Mourinho had spent around £400 million on players. Even if, in a few instances, he wasn't endowed with the reinforcements he specifically wanted. In addition to which, the style of football was often unpopular. And while Mourinho did enjoy some success over near rivals, that derby win in April 2018 being a highlight, the era was still littered with disappointing results against high-powered teams. In turn, each of those was seemingly also replete with antagonistic moments. either in the press auditorium or the technical area. But that's part of what makes the period so conflicting. Denying the lows, the arguments, the often disappointing league performances, and the often adversarial nature of Mourinho's management would be disingenuous. But then to isolate Mourinho's performance from the relative achievements of those who preceded and followed him at Old Trafford would be to do the same, as it would be to ignore the environment in which all those coaches operated, or the conclusion that each of them, in spite of their contrasting personalities and varying footballing beliefs, has produced a disappointing outcome. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic brings you the best sports journalism in the world in a personalised experience, connecting you with the stories and teams that you care about the most. There's coverage of 13 sports, plus direct access to world-class journalists through live Q&As, discussions and podcasts. And you can try it now for free for 30 days by clicking the link in the description.